Holden Manz is located in Franschhoek, but when I look at the variety of grapes going into the Proprietors blend white 2020, I'm guessing that not all the grapes are coming from the Franschhoek Valley. The wine is origin Western Cape, but we have a very interesting blend with 31% Chenin Blanc, 29% Chardonnay, 24% Viognier, and 16% Semillon. And I think all the grapes kind of show in this blend. Individually, they all bring something. That's the beauty of blend, and blends are always difficult to manage, but that's as well, that can be the trademark, the DNA of a property of a winery like Holden Manz. What do you have in your glass, Kathy?
Well, it'll be interesting to hear what you say about this. But for me, blends work best when every single component does actually give something to the wine, and you can either taste it, feel it, or smell it. But then also for me, blends speak differently to different people, depending on your own palate and your olfactory senses and your sensitivity. So for me, this wine, although it's only 24% Viognier, today it's actually showing quite a lot of Viognier character for me. Initially, I didn't pick it up. I got the peach of Chenin and the orange blossom of the Chardonnay, and those two components make up 60% of the blend. But now that it's opening up in the glass, I'm getting quite a lot of that lifted apricot perfume from Viognier on the nose, and then that follows through for me, and so that what I get on the palate is an oily mid-palate.
Yes.
It's kind of a little slipperiness. And then once again going to the finish, sometimes Viognier can have a subtle bitter lift. To me, it's kind of akin to Gewürztraminer, though Gewürztraminers can be slightly harder.
Yes.
And let's also face it, quince from Chenin, depending on where the Chenin comes from, also has that little bit of a bitterness. But for me, I'm definitely getting Viognier on the nose, on the mid-palate, and on the finish. That said, the other components are adding, they're fleshing it out. How can I put this? I think here, for me personally, the Chenin and the Chardonnay are kind of the whole meal.
Yeah.
And they're fleshing it out and adding some of the substance. And then the Viognier is quite a heavy dash of seasoning, but it actually works for me with this wine. It's drinking really nicely.
Yeah, I mean, Viognier is a quarter of the blend, and yes, you have this slightly dried apricot and on the nose and on the palate, and the oily character, the oily texture on the middle palate is, yes, tended to. Viognier is a very low acidity grape, so it tends to offers this very velvety, round, rich, opulent middle palate, especially when it comes from a warmer climate like South Africa. And on the slight bitterness on the finish that gives like the salt and pepper in the wine. Yes, Viognier, when it's properly ripe and sometimes very ripe in South Africa, tend to have this slight bitterness on the finish. But don't forget, we have a little touch of Semillon, and 16% of Semillon can give this green touch, this herby, leafy finish, and slightly bitter texture. And bitter can sound bad as a name or as a word on its own, but it's actually the freshness that's lingering on your palate.
For me, bitterness is seldom a negative in a wine for me because it does lift the palate, it can cut sweetness, it can add a bit of texture. A wine has to be really bitter for me not to like it. And I do find it a little bit of a phenolic grip. There's a little bit of tannin left behind here, but it's really nice, it's interesting. Be fun to see what the other people find.
It's an interesting, but it's a full wine. It's a ripe wine. It's a rich wine. It's a mouthful wine. Enjoy.